have all of you today to this talk, Islam, Authoritarianism, dan Kemunduran Bangsa. I think it's a very important talk. It's very timely. Issues that have been raised recently as the newspaper started to talk about the Prime Minister also now saying that before he cites the Quranic verses anymore, he will ask Jakim for the interpretation. So that makes a serious problem. Maybe we also need to have a Jakim certification, but well, I think we're all grown up enough, right? So the issues that are surrounding the book and the discussion that we're going to have after it will basically deal with the issues of the relationship between state power, authority, with state power and the ulama, right? Or whether they should be in cahoots or whether they should be separated. The traditional interpretation was always the idea that the ulama should be the protectorate between the leaders or the umara or the state and the public, and they should be the one that prevents the state, the leaders or the state from abuse of the general public. However, we find that more and more places, states have co-opted and even used or abused the ulama in order to control the public or the general society, either to make them quiet or to make them under their control. So this is what we're going to explore today, whether it is productive, counterproductive, or should we have a different narrative in the modern times. Especially, as we said, before the Quran was not translated, and therefore it's hard for the general public not to read. Those who cannot read Arabic, or the Bible before, which was in Greek or Latin, was not translated, was almost forbidden to be translated. But once you had it translated, and the printing press first book that was printed was the Bible itself, and therefore people talk about the idea that we can read it directly, and that we may or may not need the authority of the priest in order to interpret. Can't you make up your own mind? So this is strange. In 2023, we are still discussing the same issue. 24. I'm not only old, but I forget everything. So, it's kind of strange that we are still discussing the issue whether the human being can interpret directly the will of God, or, of course, we can learn from others, but shouldn't be we the one interpreting and trying to understand and how to practice the will of God. After all, the Quran and the religious texts are meant for men, and there were no intermediaries before. Should there be intermediaries today who would now not only regulate, but inform you what the interpretation is, although there have been so many interpretations, and the Malaysian interpretation is, well, up to you to decide. All right, without further ado, I'll call on Prof. Zahrom to launch the book first. To give a welcoming speech. I'm a bad moderator to.
Okay. Okay. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to today's book launch by the Islamic Renaissance Front (IRF). It is a book launch that would have passed by quite quietly in another venue, had it not been for the noises and seemingly inconsequential criticisms aired and generated, leading to its cancellation at that particular venue. As a result, I was approached by Dr. Farouk and IRF to help provide the venue for the launch, and he immediately agreed because throughout my career as an academic, I have been opposed to this cancel culture, often propagated by those against the open exchange of ideas and knowledge. It is too often also propagated by those with closed minds, sometimes clueless about what they are opposing beyond the stereotyped and meaningless labels they or the leaders they blindly follow attached to the different ideas, the questioning individuals and groups that they refuse to engage with. As academics, some of us are in the business of opening minds, of challenging ideas often taken for granted by many. However, there are many more in Malaysia as elsewhere who wish to maintain the status quo, not rock the boat, primarily because they tend to benefit from a situation where there are few questions asked and much conformity. It is this bigger group that we need to push back against, irrespective of the labels they may want to pin on us. An environment, a culture of anti-intellectualism has been perpetuated for too long around the world and arguably in the Islamic world as well. For people like Professor Ahmet Kuru, this has come about not because of the nature of Islam, but more so because of the motivations and self-serving nature of powerful groups of Muslims working hand in glove with the state. He discusses this historically in his book, Islam, Authoritarianism, and Underdevelopment, a global and historical comparison, published in 2019 by Cambridge University Press. As one reviewer put it recently, in reading Professor Kuru's book, we will understand what needs to be done to correct the intellectual desert within Muslim societies, in which Muslims will continue to live under the yoke of double oppression in the hands of the authoritarian state-ulama alliance. It is this oppressive condition that has stunted the social, political, and economic progress of Muslim societies for the last few centuries. This is a review by Muhammad Imran Muhammad. Yeah? This important 2019 book, now having been translated into Bahasa Malaysia by Hashir Mujadi and edited by IRF's Dr. Ahmad Farooq Musa, is the subject of today's launch and the subject of the mini controversy generated recently. There will be a panel discussion about the book, and I hope and I believe the circumstances that it talks about. But before all that, let me end this brief welcome and invite Professor Ahmet Kuru to proudly launch the book. Professor Ahmet Kuru.
This is the mic, right? Yeah. Thanks. Yes. So, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and I am officially launching the Malay version of my book, and I'm very happy and thankful to all the Malay organizers, starting with you, and then the Dr. Farooq for inviting me, for the kind panelists, and all Malaysian friends, readers, intellectuals, scholars, for such a hospitality they show me. You know, my son, 11-year-old, whenever we see a difficulty, he said, "Father, inna ma'al usri yusra." After every difficulty, there is a goodness. And it starts with some tension, but at the end, I think I will leave Malaysia with very good memories. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Arum. You can begin the speech now as you explain the book.
Yes. Sure, I will. So now I will have a brief presentation using PowerPoint. Then we will have a panel discussion. Then we will get questions from audience. I will use this microphone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me start with the background. I grew up in Turkey in the middle of a secularist Islamist debate about the history, present, and future of Turkey. A major discussion was the Ottoman Empire, how successful Turks were militarily and otherwise vis-à-vis the Europeans, how they saw themselves superior to Europeans, and how come those Europeans surpass Muslim Ottomans, colonized Middle East and North Africa as a very long, 200 years long process. So for the secularists, the problem was Islam itself. And it did not start with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's and secular republic. No, it started in the late Ottoman era. And I documented in my book how the late Ottoman secularists used Islam as a scapegoat of the problems the empire was suffering. But on the other side, the Islamists defend, of course, the position by just attacking Western reforms. And they say, no, those reforms were all wrong. And then when I study political science at the University of Washington during my PhD, 9/11 happened. And 9/11, of course, brought the issue of Islam at the very center of American public debates. In addition to horrible invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, and many things nobody defends now in the United States, there was also academic debate. And major names such as Bernard Lewis and Samuel Huntington were part of the debate. And for me, that was a direct challenge because my advisor was a student of Huntington. And then the idea of clash of civilizations and essentialist blaming of Islam. So, a major motivation for me to write the book showed that this essentialist, orientalist notion of Islam is wrong. And the chapter 1 of the book, the readers will see, try to disprove any connection between Islam and violence, show that how Western military forces really use violence for hegemonic global domination. And there are many various reasons for wars, state and civil wars and terrorism in many Muslim majority and non-Muslim majority cases. So, but after putting this issue of violence aside, there is a discussion of authoritarianism and underdevelopment. And before presenting you some maps and slides, let me tell you that very briefly, the critics, first of all, present as if I am linking Islam and violence. It showed that they didn't read beyond the abstract and the intro. They have no idea what the book is really all about. But they could simply look Indonesia, for example, where my book was translated 2.5 years ago, now making 5th printing. I had a visit last year. I have very good connection with Nahdlatul Ulama Muhammadiyah and gave many speeches online in person. So I'm making the joke that I am like a celebrity in Indonesia. And nobody challenged my credentials. As a Turk, knowing Ottoman history, someone study Arabic, and the bibliography will show the sources from Ghazali, Mawardi, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Rushd, so on and so forth. From a political science perspective, I study religions and look how Muslim societies transform and make comparison, especially early Islamic history and today. So just one last point about the debate in Malaysia. First time in my life, I am attacked as a secularist and liberal that I really don't know what it means. I have no idea what it means. I need to check dictionary to learn. But I am a practicing Muslim, which I am ashamed to say because I don't need to tell about my personality, right? I came here for a scientific presentation. That's what I study. So it all starts with this 2019 book, translated about a dozen languages, and Malay is very important for me. I am very happy. And authoritarianism in the Muslim world is visible in many data sets like Freedom House, Polity, Economist Unit, and they socioeconomic criteria. When we look at GNI per capita in Muslim societies, despite oil money, despite the fact that we have 60% of world's oil reserves, still GNI per capita is low. Literacy, schooling, life expectancy also show some low degrees. How do we explain that? So in the literature, as I said at the very beginning, there are those who blame Islam and Muslim culture. I call them essentialists. And throughout the book, I tried to show how misleading this argument is for many reasons. And a major reason is that for 600 years, Muslim societies were much more successful than Western European societies, and almost the rest of the world except China. And they were producing cutting-edge philosophers, economic entrepreneurs, and Islam was perfectly compatible. Even today, there are multiple interpretations of Islam. And some Muslim societies are successful, some not. An alternative is anti-colonial discourse. I take it seriously. Of course, colonization was damaging, destroying certain institutions, and exploitative. But chronologically, the argument I'm producing here is that the European colonizers were able to dominate and colonize because Muslim countries, especially in Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, lost their superiority, lost their power. Then that gave them, Europeans, the opportunity to colonize. Then my question, how come Muslim societies, which were much more productive, became weaker vis-a-vis Europe? And there is more scientific discussion about institutions. If you have good institutions, you have development, better institutions, you are underdevelopment. But I am asking, who produce institutions? Throughout the book, the answer is that there are 4 classes of people: political class, religious class, economic class, intellectual class. If these 4 classes have certain level of balancing, and they have autonomy to each other, then societies have progress, productivity, dynamism. If some classes dominate the others, or 2 classes make an alliance to dominate and marginalize others, we have stagnation. So let me put it in a historical context, that very roughly, a simple analysis show that from the 8th to 12th centuries, there were Muslim supremacy in terms of philosophy and natural sciences, economy and military. But after 1200s came a time of comparable level of development, where Europeans now have started universities like Sorbonne, Oxford, Cambridge, and they started to have a bourgeois class. Because when we look at historically, from the collapse of the Roman Empire to the 12th century, Europe was dominated by the Catholic Church and military aristocracy. Europe didn't have a dynamic merchant class. Europe didn't have an intellectual class. For 500 years or so between St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, it was difficult to find an eminent philosopher in Europe. But after the 11th century, after the Gregorian reform of 11th century, the institutionalization of church-state separation began. The universities are open, and city-states like Genoa, Venice, Florence, and later on in Netherlands, Antwerp, Amsterdam, started to write with a merchant class. And merchant families like Medici family gave birth to scientific and scholarly patronage. They became patrons of Leonardo, Galileo, Machiavelli. That's how Europe, from a time of clergy state marginalizing economic entrepreneurs and intellectuals, came to a time where intellectuals and economic entrepreneurs were appreciated, and they led to the rise of West. That's what we call. Whereas in the Muslim world, initially, there were much more complexity, and intellectual class, represented by both philosophical and religious classes, had certain level of autonomy and independence, and there was very strong economic entrepreneur class. Merchants were appreciated. They developed institutions. For example, the check we use today in English and the French language, it's come from Persian sheikh, because it was the Muslims first produced the institution that you can write numbers and signatures on a piece of paper and it turned into cash. That's how between 8th and 12th centuries, Muslims had autonomy and independence between political, religious, economic, and intellectual classes. But later on, what I call ulama-state alliance emerged in the Muslim world, and then they marginalized economic entrepreneurs, they marginalized intellectual class. That's how, from Muslim supremacy, we reached a comparable level of development, and after the 1700s, we reached to Western European domination. So this is the basic argument, and let me briefly expand and clarify what I mean by Muslim Golden Age. It was a time where merchants and commerce were funding Muslim scholars, ulama. Of course, philosophers like Ibn Sina had state patronage, but the fact that they were receiving money from public authorities didn't turn into a major political legitimacy for politicians, because philosophers did not represent a single unit. They were individuals with confusing and confused ideas, very contradictory and multiple views. And they didn't have a religious legitimacy to influence the masses. But the ulama had a credibility, and many of them refused to use this credit to legitimize political authority. We know of the anecdotes of Abu Hanifa. When Abbasi Caliph asked him to be a judge, he refused. Then the Abbasi Caliphate put him in jail. He was poisoned to death. Imam Shafi was arrested, put in chains. Imam Malik was beaten and his legs were broken. Ahmet bin Hanbal was sentenced to death during the inquisition of Abbasi Caliph Ma'mun and his Mu'tazili allies. So the rationalist Mu'tazili established an alliance with the Abbasi Caliph Ma'mun, and it was very bad, very dictatorial. And Ahmet bin Hanbal is the hero of that story to say no to that dictatorship of political alliance. And these anecdotes are supported by certain numerical data I cited in the book. For example, according to one study, out of 3,900 ulama from Egypt to eastward between 8th and mid-11th century, only 9% accepted to be public officer, accepted to be receiving money. One very big example is Abu Yusuf, the student of Abu Hanifa, which has been criticized since by then because of many things, especially accepting to have a public office. In Ihya Ulumuddin, for example, Ghazali is very critical of Abu Yusuf. And then it was very different from how Abu Hanifa rejected to be part of the government. But, of course, there are scholars at that time who accept to public offices, but they were a minority, 9%. 91% had multiple jobs. Ahmed bin Hanbal worked in textile sector. Abu Hanifa was a silk merchant. We know that there are barber shops run by ulama and multiple jobs, but mostly commerce. But in the 11th century, things started to change. First of all, there was an economic crisis. The Iraqi fields became less and less arable because of the high level of salinization with salt coming from water. And then Abbasi treasury started to have limited cash. Therefore, they started to distribute lands to military and civilian officers, what we call ICTA system. And this land revenue distribution of the ICTA system became a new semi-feudal economic system, replacing the old market money-based economy. Later on, the Selçuk Turks came and established the Selçuk Empire, and they make the ICTA system even deeper. Then Ottomans came with the Tımar system. Safavids had a very similar system, and this make centralized military state control the land, marginalize landowners, marginalize the merchants. And the result was that the declining economic and social influence of merchants. And this military state coming with the conquest mentality by the Selçuks and Ottomans and producing the ICTA system, and it was combined by Abbasi Caliph Qadir's project, because Abbasi Caliph Qadir, as you've seen in the map, was reacting to the fact that Shia forces control Middle East and North Africa in the 11th century. The alternative Fatimi Caliphate in today's Egypt, Karmatis in the Arabian Peninsula, Hamdanis in northern Syria, Buyids even in Baghdad itself. And Abbasi Caliph Qadir therefore called many military powers and the ulama to bring an alliance against these Shia forces. And the Selçuk Empire accepted the call during his son Qaim. They came to Baghdad, then they expand their rule, and eventually these both Buyut rule, Hamdani, Karmati, and Fatimis removed by the Selçuks, then the Mamluks. And during that time, we see that there is a religious change, economic change, military political change. It's a time what we call in political science, agent structure were ready for transformation. The structure, economic, religious, political in the 11th century. The agents came in the form of Abbasi caliphs, Selçuk sultans, and Nizamul Mulk. So when I sent the project to a Turkish academic in America first, he replied saying that, Ahmet, I'm afraid you are showing that we Turks destroyed the golden age. I said, no, my friend, it's not Turks per se. It's Abbasi caliphs were Arab. Nizamul Mulk was Persian. We did it together with Arabs and Persians. So then there were Nizamiya madrasas replacing the old system of merchants sponsoring scholarship. It became more centralized scholarship. And therefore, there emerged a much more standard production of Islamic scholars and certain level of marginalization of independent scholars, marginalization of merchants. In the 11th century, this process started in Central Asia and Iran. In the 12th century, spread to Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and then westward. Meantime, the colonizers of the Middle Ages, Crusaders and Mongols, also played an important role. Because when they attack Muslim majority societies, people sought military heroes. It was normal that when Mongols came to kill millions of people in Muslim cities, and then Crusaders attack and destroy, people ask, where is the military hero? And military heroes came in this form of Saladin, who gave birth to Ayyubi dynasty, then Mamluks, who gave birth to, Ayyubis gave birth to Mamluks. And Saladin, of course, defeated Crusaders, then Mamluks halted the Mongol invasion. And that gave them credibility. Even today in Egypt, when we analyze how come the military has so deep political legitimacy, why are they running the country, it's important to understand the background, how the military received political legitimacy during this Mongol and Crusader era. And then Muslims kept producing high-level caliber scholars like Ibn Khaldun and Ibn Rushd. But after the 12th century, these scholars were no longer appreciated. Ibn Rushd, certain books were burned. Today, for example, we have Ibn Rushd exegesis of Plato's Republic as a translation from Hebrew translation. We don't have the Arabic original because it was destroyed. Ibn Khaldun was lucky. He was not attacked because he was not a philosopher, but he was mostly forgotten, except Ottomans looking his explanation of the rise and fall of civilizations. His main theories were mostly neglected by Muslim societies. And the Kerime merchants in Egypt were marginalized by the Mamluk military authority, which possessed and seized their properties and their assets. This table, for example, shows us how a transformation happened between the early period and the later period in Egypt. According to historian Shas Miller's book, when I quoted the numbers, as you see, the occupational terms like CEO, CFO, bank manager, etc. It shows the division of labor and resources. The commercial numbers, as you see, slightly decline from 233 to 220. But the terms about state and ulama jump from about 100 to 500. It shows how their capacity expanded at the expense of commercial class. Then came the three empires, Ottoman, Safavi, Mughal, which showed that Muslims recover politically, militarily after the Crusaders and Mongols, but they never recover intellectually, economically. The golden era never repeated itself. Even in Islamic sciences, the time of Imam Shafi, Ghazali, Taftazani, Jurjani ended in the 1500s. After that, it was very rare to see a great scholar, even in Islamic sciences, let alone natural sciences. And then came the printing revolution in Europe. So Europeans used three instruments they learned from Chinese very effectively: gunpowder, nautical compass, and printing press. And out of the three, Muslims only pick up gunpowder. Because in the negotiation and decision-making table, there were military commanders, and they knew and easily understood the importance of gunpowder. But printing was not an essential element, whereas in Europe, commercial class merchants were so active, and they immediately opened publishing houses. They even printed Quran Kareem and tried to export to Ottoman Empire because they wanted to earn money. They were business people. But the Ottomans didn't have that business class, and it didn't have a deep intellectual class pursuing printing. And the result was that we didn't get printing press about 300 years. The literacy rate remained very low in the Ottoman Empire vis-a-vis Europe. So to wrap up the presentation, there is the historical legacy of the marginalization of economic entrepreneurs and intellectuals. And today, there is one element which is oil money. So historically, the Iqta and Timar systems provide agricultural money to the established authorities. And in the last 50 years, oil money create rentier states where state receive money from oil and doesn't need people's taxation. But before this modern transformation, of course, let me briefly say the colonial era, because after the three empires, Europe had transformations, make its institutions stronger, then they colonized the Muslim world. And in fact, this is a map I prepared. I was very proud of it until the Dutch edition came. The editor emailed me saying that this map doesn't make any sense, we are going to delete it, and we are not putting in the book. I said, what do you mean? This is like my child. I worked so much time on it because every color in the European country represents the colonized country in the Muslim world, as you see Netherlands, Indonesia, and then France in West Africa. And this is a time at the beginning of the First World War, where today's Turkey, Iran and Arabian Peninsula and certain parts of Middle East were not colonized yet. Then came the First World War. Ottomans were defeated, and the French and British forces even colonized most other parts of the Middle East. And that created a debate in the Muslim world, especially in Istanbul and Cairo. The Ottoman Sultan started the reforms. Muhammad Ali Pasha in Cairo started the reforms. They were intellectuals like Muhammad Abduh in Cairo, and they discussed. And then since that time, Muslims, from that time to present, there are reform attempts, especially from the foundation of Turkish Republic in 1920s until the Iranian Revolution, 1970s. For about 50 years, there was a time of secular mood in the Muslim world. Turkey was secular republic. Iran under Shah was more secular than it is, of course, today. Emmanuel Shah in Afghanistan, Ba'ath regime in Syria, Ba'ath regime in Iraq, Jamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt, Habib Bourguiba in Tunisia. Then you may ask, okay, they all sideline ulama, but they didn't solve the problems. Because it's not about sidelining ulama, it's about allowing intellectuals and economic entrepreneurs to be productive. So those reformists mostly were military leaders, from Turkey's Kemal to Egypt's Jamal. They were military leaders who believe in top-down modernization. Instead of ulama, they put bureaucrats, especially military generals, into the system. They never truly appreciate intellectual diversity. They never truly appreciate private economic entrepreneurship. And then we didn't have the expected dynamism in Muslim countries. Then eventually politicians started to reestablish ulama state versions like Diyanet in Turkey, Al-Azhar in Egypt. Because of their political failure, they tried to show themselves as good Muslims to appeal the population. Then after the Iranian Revolution, we have new legal desecularization processes, but at the end, we have the secularist experience, which was not very successful, or more post-Iranian experience, which is not very successful, because in both cases, there is no sufficient emphasis on intellectual and economic creativity and dynamism. Then came oil money, as I referred to, as the economic basis, and many Muslim governments use oil money for reestablishing their authoritarian rules. And this economic dimension is very crucial, understanding the future, because if in the future the oil money is depleted, if there's a new energy resources to replace oil, there will be a major transformation. Even in Saudi Arabia today, we are seeing how the declining oil money forced the leaders to rethink about everything. So, to conclude, of course Islam is not the culprit. Colonialism doesn't seem to be the primary cause either. Institutions matter, but institutions established by human beings with authorities who have ideology and power. So this is a big global debate. I'm happy to see, after many translations, finally, alhamdulillah, the Malay translation. And thanks again for organizing, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion, then the questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kuru. I'm not going to make any comments since the two panelists from the forum will probably make much better comments than me anyway, and I better shut up in front of my wife, right? So, please, Dr. Fadiluddin and Prof. Zaro, please, if you can come up. You want to sit down or you want to?
I'll just, they also can, but I'm going to read the little thing that I wrote. Yeah, sorry that I didn't make any. Huh? Oh. Assalamu alaikum. Selamat sejahtera kepada semua, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. I should thank the University of Nottingham, Malaysia campus for allowing this important book to be launched here. Thank you to Professor Dr. Zaharom for giving the speech, and Professor Kuru for launching his own book. Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment, a global and historical comparison, which has been translated into Malay as Islam, Autoritarianisme dan Kemunduran Bangsa by Hashir Murshidi Husam and edited by Dato' Ahmad Farooq Musa. Thank you also to Professor Ahmet Kuru for writing this important book. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad Farooq Musa, as fellow discussant and organizer, for inviting me as a discussant for this topic. And of course to Dr. Isham Pawan Ahmad as a moderator. Okay. I guess I should just say, whenever a good book or idea comes around, we must read it, discuss its merits and demerits, for all to know and be informed. That is one of the mark of a democratic society. Educated people should not be afraid of books. If we disagree with it, we make arguments and bring proofs why we disagree with it. I hope more book clubs and clever young people would bring up and discuss this book throughout Malaysia, actually. After reading what little that I have read about this book, and I only have time to read the report published by Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. I have been persuaded that this book could become a catalyst for positive change in the near future. This book has reminded me of Shakib Arslan's small book in 1930, لماذا تأخر المسلمون وتقدم غيرهم, which is why do Muslims lag behind and others progressed. And so after observing various Islamic reforms in 19th and 20th century since then, or during that time period, and their failures, right, if we come closer to our time, and Professor Kuru basically nailed down the answer in his book. Authoritarianism, which resulted from the state and ulama alliance, just like it happened in Christendom. And authoritarianism over time causes anti-intellectualism, as he has shown. If you notice, in this country, liberalism, feminism, secularism, religious pluralism, and to a lesser extent democracy have become dirty words. Almost similar to immorality or kafir, right? And nobody of good repute have came up on TV or newspaper or social media to correct the sad situation. What's the agenda? Are the politicians afraid of people who do not study social sciences, or using people who do not know social sciences to create polemics and divide the people? So this is what we have been questioning. After all these reforms, thank God that, somebody pointed out what is the problem. And we should want to try to solve our situation We can see a lot of strange things coming on social media, like what's the most recent one? Schooling is a waste of time. And this person is an influencer with lots of followers. And I mean, this correlates to our PISA assessment, right? We are doing very badly with reading, science, and mathematics. So there's something there. And also, another thing that goes around in the Facebook is science is sihr, or black magic. And this person finds followers, lots of followers, right? Thousands of followers. So this is the level of the Malaysian people now. Not to forget all this other mushrooming of unregulated religious schools that diminish our educational system. What else? So I'm going to cut it short because basically Professor has made his point of why this is very important for us to understand. He has pointed out authoritarianism is a bad thing. So therefore, even Islamization of knowledge hasn't done much despite its lofty ideals and intention. So it's a good thing. As far as I'm concerned, it's very good that we have another avenue to look at, another thing to look at, and how to work on it. There will be, of course, many people who will reject new ideas, right? But yes, the citizens, concerned citizens, have been complaining. What's after all of this reform? Where are we going? We haven't gone anywhere, and we are getting. We feel more and more restricted. Many of us have to restrain ourselves, self-censor what we teach sometimes, because there are thought police, in a way, although for some reason they're not doing anything to people who say all kinds of things without evidence, like a few professors recently, isn't it? There are quite a number of professors recently, famous mathematicians and language professor, and yeah, they're saying all kinds of things without evidence, and nobody said anything about that, yet they're trying to stop this book launching. Okay. So, yeah, thank you, Professor Kuru, whose historical and sociological studies have provided evidence to us and given a suggestion on what to do. It's going to be difficult, but yes, there will be resistance, definitely, without a doubt. But I will definitely be using this book for my ethics class to study secularism and all of that, because secularism has got a bad name, yeah, and the other isms that I mentioned earlier. So that's all. Thank you.
Dr. Fadila, for that commentary. Can we have the second commentator, Professor Farouk, please?
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm very honored today to basically to intervene in Prof. Kuru's talk. As an editor of the book, I read the book cover to cover even before that. And, it took, how do I say, a real effort and, commitment from our side to complete the translation of the book. It was a very well-researched book. And if you have the possibility to read the book, then you might find that there are like hundreds or maybe more than 1,000 of references for this book. And I just got to know that Prof. Kuru is very fluent in Arabic as well. Because you know that if you have read in the one of the what they call detractors of this book launch, he kept mentioning that Prof. Kuru has no knowledge about Islam at all, right? And you can see that from the references, he referred to the primary source, right? Not secondary source, to the primary source. And you know, like this book is, to me, is a very well-researched book. I've edited many books, but I guess that this is the most well-researched book that I've ever edited before, right? Never before that I've edited a more well-researched book than this particular book. Yeah. RF has published more than 23 books currently, yeah, and I'm proud to be the editor of this book. So, having said that, I'm going to start this my talk. How do Aizu, can you help me? Which one? Okay, all right. Thank you. I'll start by talking about the Islamist viewpoint. Because actually I was raised an Islamist, so I have to talk about this. And in the Islamist viewpoint, you say that it is very simple, right? Because this entire world is divided into two, black and white. Good, Islam, and evil, Tawhid, right? The verse Tawhid is actually, you can find in the Quran itself. It is not being invented by Tuan Haji Abdul Hadi Awang, okay? It is there in the Quran, right? So, all our problems were caused by the West and Western colonization, istigmar, as mentioned by Prof. Kuru during our book session, reading session, and that's the main reason for this Muslim world underdevelopment. And I think that it's easier for us to blame others, yeah, for our deficiencies. So that's a problem that we're having. And this is basically from the Muslim viewpoint, Islamist viewpoint. And so because of that, they say that, you know, the only way is that to come back to Islam. And there's a slogan, very well-known slogan, from the east to the west, right? From the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt to the PAS, Islamic Party of Malaysia. Al-Islam huwa al-hal. Yeah? We have Ustaz Ali Buddha here, the Executive Director of IRF. Islam huwa al-hal. Islam is a solution to all problems, right? You have Islam, that's the solution. Name Islam and it's a solution, right? And in Iran, we know that they managed to overthrow the Pahlavi monarchy, the Shah of Iran. But we know that they still have problems, right? So Islam is not basically a solution. I've written, an article before. I kept on stressing this fact that this motto is wrong. You know, to say that Islam is a solution is wrong. Islam is not the solution, all right? As a result, Islamism gradually lost its appeal in the decades following the revolution, and we know that the United Islamists failed to fulfill their promises, and that's why we have this Green Revolution and all kind of risings among the Iranians. Having said so, that I'm quite close to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and I've been invited to the anniversary every year. right? Ever since. So I wouldn't say much about what is happening in Iran, but I think all of us are very well aware of the situation in Iran. And I think because of this, among others, Ahmet wrote this important paper about Muslim politics without an Islamic State. I quoted this particular paper during our reading session at my house 2 nights ago, right? And basically, this paper, when I first read it in 2013, published by the Brookings Doha Institute, actually it basically struck me like lightning. And I thought and I believed that this was the solution to our problem in Malaysia, to our problem of having this Islamic party, wanted to establish Sharia, wanted to establish an Islamic state, and so on and so forth. Because basically this paper is trying to say that this passive secularism basically introduced by AKP, right, was probably the solution to the problem of having an Islamic state on one hand and having an assertive secularism on the other hand. And that's what we've been discussing, at our house, at my house. And from this particular paper, I wrote another paper. It was published by the New Mandala of the Australian National University about the solution that we should have in this particular country, in Malaysia, right? And because of that, I've been accused of being a secularist without then understanding what I meant by passive secularism, even though I didn't use the word passive secularism. And I didn't use the word twin tolerations as proposed by Alfred Sepan and as being forced to me to be used by Nader Hashimi, our common friend, right? Professor Nader Hashimi has been here as well, has given his talk and launched his book. And I think that this particular topic of passive secularism and twin tolerations are very important for us to understand. Yeah. Otherwise, we are going nowhere, right? I think Dr. Fazila mentioned about all the isms that were being enemies of the Islamists nowadays. Yeah. Then the next question is that I want to say is that this issue of the backwardness of the Muslim world is not new. Right? People have been talking about it, and but I think what went wrong, right? There are many answers, and I think none of them were satisfactory. Professor Ahmet Kuru here, he thought that he tried to answer this by his book on Islam Authoritarianism, Underdevelopment, a Global Historical Comparison, which we translated as Islam Authoritarianism, then Kemunduran Bangsa, perbandingan, satu global comparison, perbandingan antara global dan Pensejarahan, and as Prof. Kuru, as he mentioned at my house, right, that he likes to write books normally by stating the present and the past, because he's not a historian. That's what he said. Because I'm not a historian, so I don't start from the past and to the present, but I start from the present and then to the past. So similarly, this book has 2 parts, okay? Basically the present and then the past, right? So the first section of this book focuses on the current circumstances of the socio-economic and political situation of the Islamic world. He used a lot of data. If you read the book, there are tables and graphs. He showed some graphs and also a lot of tables, right? And he made this study about this, the contemporary status of the Muslim majority countries in terms of high level of violence, the prevalence of terrorism, low level of socio-economic development as compared to the world averages. So, and He reviews initially the prevailing answers to this question, basically on the topic of Islam and colonization. I think many people brought this issue up, and I think you told me a story of about someone who asked you, I mean, what about the colonization of the of the Muslims, of the Muslim world, right? We knew that the Muslims were being colonized. He showed a graph just now recently. I mean, about the colonization of the Muslim world from the east to the west, right? So basically, it's a common knowledge to us that this has led to the stagnation of the Muslims. We are not saying that, like the invasion of the Mongols initially by Hulagu Khan, who ransacked Baghdad and threw all our books into the river, right? The Tigris and the Euphrates, and caused the water to turn into black. Oh yeah, black or blue. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, it's about the same color. Yeah, but the thing is that we lost a lot of knowledge inside the river. This particular story, I remembered about. If I'm not mistaken, it was Hassan Torabi in Sudan. When every time he speaks, right? This was written by. An author of the book Who Needs an Islamic State, Abdul Wahab Effendi. Okay, he quote this story in his book Who Needs an Islamic State, Abdul Wahab Effendi. He says Hassan Torabi in Sudan, when he wanted to talk about the way why we shouldn't have a Sharia and things, and why we shouldn't have an Islamic State, someone will interject him and stop him and ask him, where do you have, what is your evidence? What is your dalil? Your evidence for whatever that you are saying. He was so mad at that fella because he kept interjecting his talk until he said, oh, that's in one of the books the Mongol threw in the river. Yeah. But that's what I'm going to say, okay? But Ahmet was saying that, that what do you call Islamic world decline started before the Western colonization. Meaning to say that it started well before that. It is not only after that. It started well before that. And however, Islam itself cannot explain this backwardness. Right? It is not because of Islam. Why? I think Ahmad mentioned correctly that we have a golden age. We were more civilized than the Western before. The West did not know how to use soap. We use soap. We use perfume. We use everything first before them. They were in their dark ages, right? They were in their dark ages. I wouldn't talk much about it, but we can discuss it during the question and answer session. So, criticizing the argument, the second part of the book, the past, just now the present and then the past, he puts a theory behind the lack of development and prevalence of leadership in the Muslim majority countries. To Ahmad, it was the state-clergy alliance which developed in the 11th century is the crucial reason behind the Islamic world's stagnation. We, the translator, I insisted that we use the term perselingkuhan. Our friends from Lestari Hikmah, they had translated Ahmad Kuru's smaller manuscript before, and they used the word perikatan. They use the word. I don't want to use the word perikatan, gabungan, or anything. I use the word perselingkuhan because it gives a better meaning to the word of this alliance between the ulama and state. Ahmad, this is very Malay, yeah. This persekongkulan or something like that, yeah. But persekongkulan seems like very how do I say? Criminal. It's a criminal kind of alliance, yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a separate connotation of the word perselingkuhan. Okay, all right. Okay, let's get it on. Yeah, let's get it on. So Ahmad says that from the 7th to 11th century, the Islamic world experienced a period of rapid progress. The engine behind the blooming Islamization, he argues, was relative independence of scholars and the expansion of merchants. Right? What he mentioned in his book as the bourgeois community. Yeah. The situation changed gradually in the 11th century. And the Abbasid Caliph started a new wave of Sunnization, who declared war against heterodox groups, including the Shiites, the rationalists, theologians, the Mu'tazilis, and Muslim philosophers, declaring them apostates deserving of death. If you look at history itself, you will see that the time of this, the zenith of the Muslim civilization was during the time of the Mu'tazilites, the rationalists. Yeah, Ahmad is staying at the zenith. Yeah, zenith of the Muslim civilization is during the time of the rationalists. So I think that it is very important for us to understand this and for us to appreciate the history itself and to understand, even though Ahmad said that they became authoritarian in trying to enforce their views and their beliefs. But from my reading, Ahmad, of this one scholar, Imam, what's his name? He wrote in his book about the historical history of the different mazahib in Islam and the different political parties in Islam. Imam Muhammad Abu Zahra, he said that the Inquisition during the time of Ahmad ibn Hanbal was not being conducted by the Mu'tazilis themselves, but by a political figure, a minister in the Mu'tazili government at that time. So it was the government who was doing this inquisition against Ahmad bin Hanbal. It was not the Mu'tazili philosophers, and it was not the Mu'tazili doctrine, because it was against the Mu'tazili doctrine, because they believe in reason, right? They believe in free will. So how could they impose their belief on others? So I mean, you might disagree with me, but I tend to agree with Muhammad Abu Zahra on this particular issue. Yeah, right. So these ulama and military rulers developed a reciprocal relationship in which ulama legitimized the state and the rulers provided financial support for ulama. It's a quid pro quo. It's like Najib, quid pro quo, yeah? You help me, I help you, something like that. Yeah, the alliance marginalized the independence of scholars and merchants who were the foundation of socio-economic development. That's why from the 18th to 19th century, ulama usually opposed any development and change to continue their monopoly over Islam. During our reading session at my house, I asked you one particular question about the printing press, if you remember about it, right? Ahmad mentioned about three things, right, that causes the problem with the Muslim countries, right? One is this gunpowder, the other one is printing press, and the third one is compass, yeah, nautical compass, right? This particular issue about printing press is what you call a very sticky issue. Okay, it has been debated. Why Muslims were lacking in trying to, to embrace this printing press. And I told Ahmad, and I said to Ahmad that, that the Protestantism, right, it was being spread by Martin Luther because of this printing press. When he nailed his 95 thesis on the Church of Gutenberg in Germany, and his words were being spread by this printing press. And he utilized this printing press to the utmost to spread his word all across Europe. And half of Europe turned to become Protestant. right, as compared to Catholic. And it was because of that. I gave a talk at this university, multimedia university, yeah, the multimedia university. They invited me at that time, and I gave a talk about this and the importance of how do I say, of printing press in trying to spread the word of God, right? And why the ulama, why Muslims were somehow resistant towards this. There were many answers to that, right? I asked Ahmet what was his opinion, and he said he put the blame on the ulama, right? So it was the ulama who resisted this printing press, right, rather than anything else, right? It was different thesis from Mustafa Akhil's thesis, but I leave it to you later on to explain about this particular issue, right? Okay, next. So what we say that Europe, basically they experience a different time of transformation, what we call as secularism, a separation between church and state, and then the growth of the merchant class continued to work as the engine of European economic advances. You know about that. So the question is, why this ulama-state alliance persists? To me, I want to ask you, why is this state ulama alliance persist through the modern era despite many political changes? We see now, even now, we see now, even under the Madani government, you still have this. It's not only under Najib. It's not only Najib was wearing white robes and turbans, not turbans. He's wearing a skull cap, white skull cap, and he sat with the tariqat, the what do you call? The tasawwuf group, and made zikir perdana, yeah, Yahana, the zikr, with thousands of people, But now, even now under Madani government, we see, I'm sorry to say because he's my close friend, we see Anwar Ibrahim, I have to say softly, we see Anwar Ibrahim basically holding like a weekly or at least weekly or monthly event when he called the Tasawwuf group, just like Najib, to come to his residence, and was it residence or residence probably for this zikir and so on and so forth. And also he wanted to be seen with the ulama, all the time. And recently just Hisham quoted that, he said he wanted, while he's, the Quran. He will continue to cite the Quran. But he'll ask Jakim, to basically to endorse it. Yeah. This is basically what Ahmad has been saying. But my issue is that, why is this, persisting until this age? Yeah, I think that's basically all that I have to say, and I would like to thank you with that. Thank you very much.
Can I invite Fadila to come up? We'll have the discussion now. Thank you to both discussions. Now we'll start with the question and answer, but let me start first. Let me ask, this book has been written 5 years ago? 4.5. Now you've been sitting down for too long. So we want the second half answer. How about the modern period? Yeah. How would do you think that this alliance will continue? Can it survive modern internet, TikTok, and all these things as people now try to interpret religion directly for themselves? Or how would we promote that it opens up? Can I start with that first? Then we'll open up to the floor, okay?
Thanks so much for this very important question and your great moderation. I am thankful to panelists, Dr. Din and Dr. Farooq. And in fact, your constructive criticism about Mu'tazila is perfect. That's the model how we should engage in academic discussion. So, but your question on contemporary era, I want to not only focus today, but also say something about the future. So, you know the story of optimist and pessimist. The pessimists say things cannot get worse. Optimists say no, it can get worse. So, will things be better or worse? There are reasons to be optimistic for the future of the Muslim world. If I start with Farooq's $1 million question, and this is the main challenge to my book, how come it takes so long? I'm trying to avoid this question. In Germany, recently they asked me that you have a big problem in the book. What's my problem? The longevity of this. Then I avoid saying that. Don't ask me, ask Muslim societies. Why do they continue? Why don't they change? I, as one scholar, try to contribute to the change academically, and if everyone contributes somewhere, there will be change. The way we explain why it is so long is that, first of all, the cooperation between political and religious authorities is part of human history. That's the norm. In China, in different form. In Russia, Orthodox Church. Byzantine Empire, Orthodox Church. Today, Modi tried to establish a Hindu nationalism with Hindu religion. In Israel, you see how religion and nationalism, from history to present, this is the dominant way of life. I see two major exceptions. One is what I call the Muslim Golden Age. For various reasons, we really had a very dynamic social, political, and religious environment. It was an exception in human history. That's why it was very successful. And the other one, the recent Western experience, with many problems, because I studied French laïcité and American church-state relations in the last 300 years. And I know how complex it is in America or France. Even these two most secular societies, countries, there is constant backlash, clash, church, state, funding, teaching, politics, and today Trump is trying to bring back certain evangelical political alliance. Therefore, so it has taken too much time, less centuries. Hopefully there will be better systems and versions. Every society will find their way. And Muslims achieve something precious, and then we kind of lost it. Now West had some experiences with complexities. And in addition to that, of course, the way they have taught religion, as if this is part of religion, that influenced people, and that answer to your question why it has taken so long, because some people assume that it is haram to even discuss. And that's what, I don't want to talk about this. I refer to the book, this dimension. So, this is why it has been taken so long, because it is the human nature and general world history, and then religious teaching, and the resources. So, an individual like myself, intellectuals, social scientists, we are weak, we are alone, we are vulnerable. But the political authorities, they're powerful, they have resources. And the mass people, they like religious scholars more, they don't like us. Okay? In Turkey, when a religious scholar dies, they say, alemin ölümü, alimin ölümü, alemin önümü, which means if a religious scholar dies, universe cries. But if social scientists die, nobody cares. So that's why it has taken long. They have very strong credibility that we don't have it. Regarding the optimism, so when, as you may have noticed in the translations of the books, they all have the same painting of three philosophers we use also in the Malay edition, Greek, Muslim, Renaissance, except the Arabic. My wonderful Arab publisher, they also translated my earlier book on US, French, Turkish secularism. They put a black art at the cover of the book. I said, why are you doing this? It's so dark. There is a silhouette. They said, because you have a dark book. I say, no, this is a very optimistic book. It is not a dark book. And then when readers will be motivated for a better future when they read it. So I am optimistic because the oil money is going. They say the Stone Age ends before the end of stones, and oil age will end before the end of oil. Electrical cars, new technologies, and then I said Saudi Arabia is changing, UAE already changed, Iran may be forced to change. That's economic dimension. And then sociologically and ideologically, we will see how the young generation, and then they will come with new ideas. That's the source of hope. There are also reasons to be pessimistic. And a major reason to be pessimistic is that there is a global trend now of populist leaders bringing religion and politics, religion and nationalism. That's what, as the new book project I am trying to examine, Trump America, Putin's Russia, Modi in India, Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. And in fact, that is the topic of tomorrow's discussion at IIUM. I will have a presentation on this, and therefore I am postponing the discussion to tomorrow's panel.
But you want to know the answer come tomorrow. It's 10 o'clock, right? 11 o'clock at IIUM. Kuliah Economics, okay. The brother there first, yes. I'll take two questions at a time. Can you use the mic for the recording? Please be brief, okay?
Thank you, Prof. Kuru, for the presentation earlier. I thought it was quite insightful. I had the opportunity to read your book a few years ago. When it came out, I thought it was quite instructive for my research in Islamism in Malaysia. Now, one of the main theses that you push in your book was about and you mentioned earlier, right, the balance between how the merchant class funded the ulama class, and that's how you had the independence to critique power, but also to influence the masses to have more diversity in intellectual thought. But in reading the book, and I think I had this thought then, was that the politics of now is that the merchant class are also, I mean, if you look at big billionaires like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, who control media, who have more conservative inclinations, right, in their politics and in their ideology, I'm wondering whether that model of merchants funding ulamas as a way of independence might not be a framework that might work now. Or what is it that you feel would be the solution in this age where billionaires are not likely to fund progressive ideas? They're more likely to fund conservative ideas. I think even in Malaysia, we see groups like ISMA, for example, right? Who?
I think we get.
Oh yeah. So we have. So in Malaysia, we have conservative groups who are not part of government. They're independent, but they fund conservative ideas among preachers who are not regulated by government as well. So I guess I'm trying to square that and what your thoughts are on this phenomenon. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll take another question. We'll answer two questions at a time, okay?
I have no comments about Professor Ahmet Kuru's book, because the way I see it is almost near perfect. You have covered most of the things there. But I have a question on my good friend Dr. Farooq.
You could ask him at home. Go ahead.
In this presentation, he did mention about printing press being a hindrance to the propagation of his understanding of Islam and all those things. But printing press, if you follow the old regime, is the hard copy version. You print, sell, people read. But in this modern age of information, IT, that excuse no longer valid. You can
Well,
publish
IRF is still in the business of publication. So, all right, thank you very much. You want to address the first question? You need to push that.
Thank you. In fact, you asked Dr. Farag, but I want to say something about that. My students also came to me and said, Professor, yes, printing was important, but now there are other things. So can Muslims simply skip? And I said, no, unfortunately, historical legacies persist, the attitude, the intellectual curiosity issue and everything related. So that's what we always keep looking history, but you are right that we are changing now, but the historical legacy remain. The question was very good. Thank you for the first question. It was very good too, because it gave me a chance to say my position. I strongly believe independence and autonomy, and think that any type of monopoly is bad. For example, Plato in Republic argued that philosophers should be ruling class. And it is a horrific idea, because if we, social scientists, philosophers, rule a society, it will be very bad society. Dictatorial, utopian ideas, and so many problems. In America now, we have a problem where economic entrepreneurs, capitalists, dominate politics. They try to control academia. And we academics try to resist. In my university, for example, there was a donor tried to ask demands, and we refused, and the money goes somewhere else. And we didn't care, because we don't want money coming to dictate us things. And academic freedom is so precious that we cannot sell it. But this is a big problem in the United States. And now, unfortunately, United States is helping Israel to bomb Palestinians in Gaza. And this is it's become very unpopular policy. But politicians are affected by money, lobby groups. That's how capitalists destroying democracy. So in this regard, any group's impact on the others is bad. They can pursue a conservative agenda as long as it is competitive, as long as others can pursue other agendas, that will be fine. And in the Muslim golden era, it was also related to the fact that scholars have their own jobs. For example, Abu Hanifa was not simply funded by some merchants. No, he was working in a different sector, etc. Of course, today we have more division of labor. I understand. And I myself, for example, I'm working in a public institution. I'm receiving money. So I was challenged like that. They say, you are a bad ulama, you receive money from state. Yes, but they gave me some freedom. They don't intervene what I teach, what I speak. If money comes with freedom, it's not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
I don't know, is my working? Yeah, my working.
Could you just please identify briefly who you are?
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Kuru. I'm a lawyer. First of all, thanks to IRF for organizing this. It seems to be getting a reputation of every time you organize something and the scholar is basically from Turkey, something seems to happen.
We're trying to break the trend.
Okay. So again, Prof. Kuru, thank you very much for your talk today and yesterday, which I also had the pleasure of attending, and I've read your book. And again, it's another thing. In Malaysia, we have a book that's come out a few years ago, and if it's in the English language, nobody says anything. The moment it translates into Bahasa Malaysia, suddenly the authorities all wake up and realize that that's this book, and then try to stop it. Again, another trend in Malaysia. But I have two questions, and the one leads to the other. Firstly, I've just sort of last month spent a couple of weeks in Egypt, and I went around the old pyramids and also the old temples. And there is in Karnak a temple that has a little section dedicated to Alexander the Great, Iskandar Zulkarnain. And my guide said basically, you know, Alexander, of course, was not Egyptian. He, you know, and therefore he had to persuade the priests of the temple, and he did a bargain with them. If you can persuade the people of Egypt to accept me as an Egyptian king, I will continue all the privileges that you, the priests, have had. So the idea of this, you know, symbiotic relationship between the rulers and the clerics, as it were, is not new. It's something that's been there even pre-Christian times. So I suppose my question is, why is this such a revelation? Because it seems to be something that is a constant feature of society. But that leads me to the second question. You talk about patronism, where the rich sort of sponsor the intellectuals and things like that, and the merchants sponsor the scholars. And I appreciate the point that you just made about the independence. But at the end of the day, what we see in many cases is a corruption of that relationship. And that's my second question. You don't really talk about it. It's almost like the elephant in the room, but we don't mention it. What is the role of corruption at the end of the day in all this? Isn't the appeal by the authorities, by the rulers, for legitimacy, and this is really what's happening in Malaysia now, right? You got Prime Minister saying, you know, I will make sure that my exegesis conforms with the state-accepted doctrine. They're seeking legitimacy, and so this idea of, you could say, prostituting yourself for legitimacy in the hope that you can gain political and religious support, isn't that also a form of corruption? And so, how do you figure or factor all that in? Thank you.
All right. I know that's a long question, but we should take two questions at a time.
Welcome. I'm Fadla Umar. I'm from director of the Islamic Research. What I'd like to ask you this: what about the role of Waqf in the Islamic civilization, and didn't that play an important role in the independence rather than not just funding from the merchant class? Secondly, is authoritarianism intrinsically bad because China, Singapore, and even Malaysia and Indonesia under authoritarian regimes performed far better than the Arab countries, and in so-called development. So you don't seem to cover that aspect in the thing. The other thing is a lot of research. Okay, sorry, I've got a lot of points, but research in Muslim countries is much better in the non-Arab world than in the Arab world. So a lot of your focus seems to be on the Arab world rather than and finally, look at Indonesia and Malaysia. They had a nice sort of compromise between a religious state and a non-religious state. Indonesia had Pancasila, which acknowledged the existence of God and acknowledged the existence of religion and its role in the state. Malaysia had this Islam is the religion of the federation. So both Malaysia and Indonesia had this sort of compromise, not an Islamic state, but not a secular state, but not an Islamic state in the normal form. Pakistan and Iran, they went the other route and failed. So I'd just like your comment on that.
Are there no easy questions? Everything seems to be so... Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll have 45 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. So, starting with the latest, thank you for both set of questions. Starting with the latest, I had the chance to analyze Indonesia much deeper than Malaysia. In the case of Indonesia, there is a democracy with federal system, and in terms of Pancasila, not only theory but also the fact that two major Islamic organizations, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, embrace and support, and recently Pak Yahya, I met personally several times, follow this humanitarian Islam method, but there is so much back and forth. As you know, Ahok, the Chinese Christian governor of Jakarta, his presence was very much telling, because even in Turkey, it's impossible to think about a non-Muslim mayor of Istanbul. But Indonesia somehow, as a temporary experience, achieved that, but then he was put in jail for blasphemy accusations. Then he came back as CEO of the petroleum company. So Indonesia is very complex. And basically what I am trying to say, every country is supposed to find its formula. Even in the West, United States, France, and others try to constantly update religion-state relations. And in the case of Indonesia, there are big challenges. And my Indonesian friend said that we like your book because of the Muslim Golden Age, but at the same time, it came to us at a time when there was a big challenge of ulama-state alliance, how Nahdlatul Ulama is going to be part of the government or independent, and the rise of certain Islamic groups, etc. So that's one thing. But basically, when I published the book, the main cases, of course, were not only Middle East and North Africa, but also Central Asia and the Balkans. Then came Pakistan. It became, I have had a very deep engagement, and from here I'm going to Pakistan for talks in Islamabad. They said that what you call ulama-state alliance, we call it military-state nexus, mullah military nexus. And this is definitely something they take very seriously. And then from Morocco to Indonesia, that's a big debate. Your Arab versus non-Arab questions are important, because in the second chapter of the book, Alfred Stepan, as Farouk referred to his twin toleration, has an article, Arab versus non-Arab. And I did my postdoc with him in Colombia. I disagree with him and show that the problem cannot be simply reduced to Arab problem. Non-Arab Muslim majority societies also have problems of authoritarianism and underdevelopment. So, I wish I had written the questions, but do you remember any other part? Oh, China, yeah.
The corruption.
Yeah, corruption, of course. So,
China, Singapore.
yes. So the chapter 3 in my book compare East Asian authoritarian economic growth model of China, Singapore, and others with Middle East. There are 5 major differences. In the East Asia, which makes authoritarianism still correlated with economic growth in East Asia. In East Asian countries, first of all, they heavily invest in education. In PISA scores, when you look at the PISA, which is PISA, the global secondary school students exams, East Asia are at the top, regardless of democracy or autocracy. Middle East are at the bottom. Second, East Asian countries have the economic growth model based on production and export. Whereas Middle East countries, mostly Arab and Iran, they were oil rentier, and they are rentier model. And because of this rentierism, they don't have an economic interdependence, they have much more military adventures. Whereas East Asia seems to be, since the Korean War, about 50 years of peaceful economic interdependence. Fourth factor is that in East Asia, they have better government efficiency. When there is an earthquake, COVID, or any other problem, governments are more efficient. Whereas in Middle East, from Egypt to even Turkey, when there is an earthquake, there is a less efficiency. And then ulama state problem also is deeper in Middle East than East Asia. So chapter 3 had a detailed analysis, but you are right, I didn't mention it in the presentation. So I want to... Huh? Waqf. Yeah, so Waqfs, I think your first question, and Waqfs established during the Seljuk and Ottoman Empire as independent source, but mostly controlled by families. So we have data that Seljuk dynasty endowed Waqfs for Hanefi, but Nizamul Mulk and Persian bureaucracy endowed for Shafi, and they try to control. Therefore, on paper, Waqfs are independent. But in reality, political authority always try to control them. That's why the difference between theory and practice when it comes to Waqf.
On the corruption.
Yeah. Did I miss anything? No. Thank you. Corruption is definitely a big thing. So last year when I was in Indonesia, I was taking photos with ambassadors, politicians, and then putting in Instagram. Then people react me saying that instead of smiling, ask about corruption, why are you not asking? I said, oh my God, I'm not a politician, I am not here. I realize that there's a big debate. And let me just briefly theoretically answer your question, which is that the separation of spheres is not a simple Western secularist fantasy for me. Some people say, oh, even Turkey, they told me, this is a Western idea. I said, no, look, it's an idea about justice. Because if, as an academic myself, I use my academic authority to favor Muslim students to non-Muslims, it is corruption, it is justice. And then when spheres dominate each other, we have a big problem in Turkey. Political authority, whomever in power, regardless of now or there, they even try to shape soccer teams, etc. So at least let sport be independent, right? If you don't allow academia and business independent. And we had, for example, the award in Turkey declaring people the artist of the state. So state is so strong that choose singers and say, we award you artists, and it's a big honor. In America, if you say, it's ridiculous, how would a singer become singer of the state, right? So therefore, if you don't let separation happening, state authority start to control everything, or sometimes capitalism control everything. And this is the deepest reason of corruption. And Donald Trump, for example, a major problem, he has no boundary between politics and economy. This is, then the definition of corruption is using public office for private purposes. But in my analysis, the lack of separation and autonomy between spheres eventually lead to injustice and corruption.
Do you have any concrete examples of the state co-opting the ulama in order to do what they shouldn't have done?
Was the question or your question?
The question is a corruption question where he's talking about can it be positive, must it always be negative?
So in fact you start with Alexander the Great, it is not a new revelation, I totally agree. The reason why it is very difficult to analyze Sunni ulama is that unlike the Shia ulama in Iran and Catholic Church, they are very invisible because theoretically they don't exist. Theoretically, there is no clergy-layman difference because my Iranian friends told me that when we pray in the mosque, the Ruhban Sınıf came, the Ruhban class came and said, you have to pray again behind us. Your prayer is not valid, etc. In the Sunni terminology, this doesn't make any sense because there is no clergy-layman distinction. That's why it's very, and also there is no pope. There is no one single leader, tangible. Therefore, it's very fuzzy when we try to keep them accountable for not taking printing press, for example. It's easier in the Catholic Church. The certain mistakes they did, it's recorded, well known, we know. But in the printing press, when I said ulama, they said, who are ulama? There's no ulama. We don't exist. It's therefore very difficult to take accountable, analyze, etc. Theoretically, your question, I think, it is possible to have a positive interaction as long as an ulama-state alliance does not discriminate the bourgeois class and the intellectuals. If they are friendly with other religions, if they don't destroy other autonomy and boundaries, then it is possible. But in practice, I don't know whether there exists a good example.
None of the questions are easy. Doesn't have any easy one? An easy question? The lady first, and then you next.
Thank you.
An easy one, huh?
Yeah, my question will be very easy because I've not done any research in this area and I've not read much about this. So I'm speaking basically as a non-Muslim living in Malaysia and seeing what's happening in Malaysia. So my question will be easy, I think, because of that. I hope...
That's what they all say before they ask the difficult ones.
Okay. I'm Mary Magdalene, and I used to teach politics in UITM for 30 years, teaching Malaysian politics. So I hope I can get a response from our other panelists as well, because I'm talking about the situation in Malaysia. I'm just wondering, as a non-Muslim, when I look at what's happening in Malaysia over the last 30, 40 years, it looks to me as if religion, Islam, is going to become more important and not less important over the years, in time to come. It is not going to be less important, it's going to be more important. And even when I see among my Muslim friends, they have become more religious in the sense that as they grow older, they tend to read more and practice more, find out more about the religion. So they become more religious in that sense. I'm just wondering, as a non-Muslim, do I matter? I mean, there are more than 30, almost 40% non-Muslims in Malaysia. So how and where do we figure in this whole scheme, all right? Are we passive objects who have no role at all and no impact at all? And the other issue I want to raise is, today, as a non-Muslim living in Malaysia with the Madani government, I know a lot of people mock and make fun of Madani government and Anwar's compassionate Islam and all that. But to me, there seems to be many versions of Islam over the many years that I've lived in Malaysia, all right, 66 years in Malaysia. Is it the Guru Nik Aziz version? Is it Hadi Awang version? Or is it Anwar Ibrahim version? And I'm very comfortable with Anwar Ibrahim version as a non-Muslim, all right? So him sitting with all the ulama, the ulama, are they all homogeneous? And then if you compare Najib Razak sitting with the ulama and having prayer sessions, I suppose, and you compare Anwar Ibrahim sitting with ulama, I think the dynamics will be very different. I'm wondering...
I'm sorry, but I think we get your question.
Yeah,
I am
whether
sorry that
the version of Islam that we are seeing today...
We have to speed this up.
Yeah, the version of Islam that we are seeing today under Anwar Ibrahim, is it going to be a more just and a more... one that will be fairer to non-Muslims as well?
We hope so, we hope so. John. I think I'm going to have to take 3 or 4 questions. We're going to wind up pretty soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. My father's name is John Kuru Villa, so somehow we are related, okay? The question is this. If the printing press can be defined as textbook and texting and everything to do with text, I want to fast forward into tomorrow. And the question is this. What is the role of social media and all of the new text and texting? How is it going to affect life? Thank you.
I'll take 1 or 2 more. Just go ahead. I'm sorry you're trying to cram everything out, but we've got, 15 minutes or so? 30 minutes. Okay, we have 30 minutes. Hey, 10. 20 minutes. Go ahead. Please be brief.
All right. Assalamualaikum and good evening. I'm Muhammad Darus bin Abdul Razak from Taiping, Perak. I hope my question will come clear because I normally like to arrange my sentences before. So, in this book, a lot has been discussed about the role that ulama and the state played in shaping the development or rise or fall of Muslim societies. But at the same time, what about individual, outside these two factors, state and the ulama, how about society itself? I mean, if we can see that each society, they have, as we can call them, just keep it simple, grandmother tales that shape people's perception of things that are almost certainly they don't come from the religious class. So, do you think which do you think is a greater has a greater impact, the ulama or the individual society itself, the people, the individual people? I hope I'm clear on what I'm trying to say.
I understand.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Dying question? Yeah, go ahead. Please be brief. Sorry? Sure. Can't you stand up? No, they are recording. So they're recording. That's why we need the mic.
Professor, I would just like to make the observation that the labeling of you as a liberal and a circular academic, don't take it to heart, because I think your book struck too close to the mark, you know. They realize that what your book is about is actually what is going on in Malaysia now. And that is their response. So it's more like a reaction to defend themselves, actually. So don't take it to heart, in my opinion. We're very happy that this book has come out and has been launched here, and we hope to read it and maybe gain some insights that will help us to chart our political future in Malaysia. The other thing I would like to say is, being a celebrity in Indonesia and being a controversial figure in Malaysia and a celebrity in Indonesia, maybe just two sides of a coin. It's a good thing for you, you know, it's good publicity. So don't be put off by it. Thank you for coming.
Don't worry, now Farouk books are all selling out. He's been signing he's been signing for hours. Last one, anyone else? I know people came from very far away, and we have a few politicians here, a few influencers. Don't you want to...
Hello, my name is Rainer. My question is asking you to predict for the future. I know you don't have crystal ball, but as a scholar, so what is your prediction for the trend? Because we see the society trend is ebb and flow with a different era. Like certain era, people are more religious, and then not so religious. Like if you study American history, there's a first religious awakening, second religious awakening, people going to church very often for one generation, and after that, they don't go to church very often and all that. In Muslim world, we see there was an era when people were more supportive of secular nationalism and all that, but then people becoming very, the conservatism is rising and all that. So your prediction for the future, how is this trend developing? What is your crystal ball? Thank you.
Thank you. So, 4 questions. Let me briefly say that the question about social media, of course, important. And maybe the next generations will criticize us if we don't follow artificial intelligence, technological development, and while discussing certain details about some not directly important issues, maybe we are missing some important trends. That's a big possibility. We should be very cautious as Muslim societies. And social media has certain connection with populism. That's what we are going to discuss tomorrow.
Make sure you come tomorrow.
So the second question about society, of course, I am in my social scientific theory, I refuse the dichotomy between the role of ideas and material factors. I think both ideas and material conditions are important, and also agency and structure, because agency and structure are both matters. So certain religious discourse establish structure, but agency always challenging. And throughout the book, I try to explain, for example, during the Ottoman Empire, how there were progressive forces. Even some sultans like Fatih, the conqueror of Istanbul, who initiated a philosophical debate about Imam Ghazali's Tahafatul Falasafa, or Sokollu, an important Grand Vizier who established the last observatory in the Ottoman Empire as the last main source of natural science. So there was constant back and forth, and today too. So therefore, we don't see a complete stagnation, etc. So the book, of course, couldn't analyze every decade, but it definitely analyzes every century in certain important centers of the Muslim world. Therefore, I'm not bringing 11th century to 20 directly. No, there is an analysis of 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century. Constant interaction between society, ulama, and the state. Then the issue of reactions, thank you for the hospitality, and yes, we will sign the book after the event. What worries me, my wife, and my mother particularly is that when we look at the social media, I saw many people sad about the event and me, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi rajiun. So in Turkey, we only say it when someone dies. So we were very much worried, but alhamdulillah, there's a good reception and hospitality. Thank you for that.
Isham, answer the question from the ladies, no? I think you're asking whether which one is better, the Islam under Anwar Ibrahim or Islam under the previous government. What I'm trying to say is that I think more importantly is the discourse of Islam itself. And how do you want Islam to be present in our society? Do you want it to be a state, an Islamic state? Do you want to have an Islamic state? Or do you want to have a secular state on the other hand? I think this is a very important discourse. And I think for the past 10 years or so, we have been talking about this issue. And I myself I have been writing a lot of articles about this particular issue, and I think Dr. K.J. John had organized a symposium at a church in Subang Jaya, Who Needs an Islamic State? A very provocative topic, and I delivered the keynote speech at that time. The thing is that, what I'm trying to say is that, to me, at this particular moment, I might change later on, I don't know, but at this particular moment, I think the best solution for this particular country, where, as you correctly pointed out, we have like 65 to 70% of Muslims and the rest are non-Muslims, the best solution would be what we call as, to use the terminology by Prof. Kuru, is passive secularism, right? And I think that that's the best solution that we're going to have, meaning to say that what he meant by passive secularism is that there is no enforcement by the state on its citizens on how to basically to practice or to religion or to have a manifestation of religious signs or symbols, for example. Meaning to say that, a Muslim woman has the right to wear hijab if she likes, and to remove the hijab if she likes as well. So that's what passive secularism is all about, as opposed to some Islamic state that basically enforces all Muslim women to wear hijab, or what we call assertive secularism, as in France, for example, that says that Muslim women should not be wearing scarf at all, or even in Turkey before Erdogan, right? I'm not trying to praise Erdogan, but before him, everybody knows about that. They're following the French laïcité, right? So basically, in this particular topic, I think his article on this Muslim politics without Islamic State was very important article, right? Very important article. And I think to quote a very important scholar who's still living now, Abdullah Naim, Professor Abdullah Naim, who's a common friend of ours. He's a mutual friend of ours. He says, in order for Muslims to be true Muslims, a Muslim must live in a secular state. Why? He can be true to his conviction and without any compulsion. If you stay in a secular, in a Muslim state, you have to follow what the state dictates you. You don't follow because of God. Understand? Because you are afraid and scared of the political apparatus or the government apparatus. So that's why you are doing that. You are performing Salatul Jum'ah, for example, the Friday prayer, right? Because you're afraid that if you don't go to the mosque,
They will arrest you.
they will arrest me.
Not for missing Friday prayer 3 times.
Oh, for missing Friday prayer 3 times, yeah. What I'm saying is it's up to conviction. It's basically, that's what Professor Abdullah Naim said. We invited him over here. We translated his book. And there was an uproar as well during his time. Of course, not as much as Professor Kuru, but only on certain quarters that they knew. And they went to his hotel as well. Nobody went to your hotel, right? At the moment, yeah. So he's safe, yeah. I just hope he'll stay safe until Thursday morning, yeah. Until he leaves on Wednesday morning. That's all. Thank you.
The question that was asked by him.
But after these remarks, they may come to your hotel.
No, the question he asked is now, what about the other groups? Instead of just the Umara and the Ulama, what about the normal people? What's their role?
Yeah, about society, yeah.
Yeah, about society.
Sure. So there we can expand the 4 into more. For example, some socialists, there was a Marxist-Leninist critique of my book, and they say, what about labor class? Did you forget labor? They even look at the footnotes and say, you mentioned labor in 2 footnotes, that's not enough. And then they invited me to anarcho-communist festival in Los Angeles. And I asked my son, 17 years old, Yusuf, what should I do? Should I go? I'm worried. He said, how much they are paying? So then, I have capitalism in my house, so strong. Then I didn't go eventually, but that was a good reaction. So in addition to 4, you can add labor or civil society. But what I was trying to say is that individuals are not free, isolated atoms. They are part of it. Many people are part of state, ulama, economic society, intellectual society, or labor movement. If you are none of these, as a single individual, of course, your impact will be limited.
How about influencers? Because I have one here. So
Yes.
how do you think their role should be? Okay, we'll give you to the last question.
No, can I just add on to the comment?
Yes, go on.
You want mine?
We're interested with the comment because I deal with my writing there, and my writing, the message that I wanted to impart about the non-Muslim is that I view that the issue I wrote antara ketuanan antara Madani Islam, ketuanan Islam, and institusi Islam. So this problem about Islam, between Madani Islam, institutional Islam, and was it supremacy Islam or something, something like that. Okay, so this problem, it has to be solved by the Muslim themselves. And I tried to tell the non-Muslim, please not to stay out, but be patient dulu. Because when the Muslim starts attacking, the non-Muslims start attacking, that gives fuel to the conservatives and the extremists. I've already analyzed that, and that's why I said, yeah, susah. Because I don't know, Ibrahim already has a lot of problems. He's not getting support. I examined Friday sermon for and I saw thousands of sermons. They don't mention all these things. They don't even have a shared values among non-Muslims, religion and all that. They're still operating in a very traditional mode. So I'm wondering that's why Anwar spends so much time with academics and at the universities and at the mosque
sometimes I think that's the wrong tactic. You have to spend more time on the social media, you know, rather than this, because that is a 1980s, 1990s method of influencing people. You influence the so-called elite and intellect, and then it goes down to the, here, you go straight to the influencer, you know, something like that.
Actually, I don't want to complicate that because time is late, but I view things that I would like to be sort of challenging the thesis. I think just start from the issues of secularism. I think majority of people, whether we live in the West or in the East or Islamic society, don't really know and don't really care whether it's secular or non-secular. That's why the populists can come in very easily. The secularism that come out from the Western society, Western political institution, is a bargaining between the clergy and the political elites. Basically, it's an agreement that they made during that time, coming from a very centralized clergy structure. In Europe, it exists, but that's why I'm going to go back to, in Europe, that exists as part of the administration. But in Islamic society, even when you mention about the collaboration between ulama and state, they are very decentralized. They are unable to enforce it. That's why you see such a big variety of Islam all over the world, especially in Lebanon, Syria. You have all type of ulama that they work with the politician. They have parliament seats, but they have all type of interpretation that which some of us would think is very crazy. But anyway, the only way that they can do it is because colonialism. If we take Malaysia, very example, the so-called secular or non-secular is basically the British that tell us that religious is your affair. You can do whatever you want, but tax is with us, economy is with us, politics, diplomacy, military, all with us. But you ulama control this with the Sultan. So, of course, when printing press is spread and all these things, the ulama say, no, we are not just this small corner, we are about everything. So that's what they are trying to claim. When they try to claim, in the early time, when nationalism, socialism were very popular, they can't do, because it looks too backward. Now, the failure of nationalism, the failure of socialism, the failure of Western democracy, it allowed them a claim. Therefore, I wouldn't want to say that this collaboration actually go beyond the pre-colonial time. It is a modern phenomenon. It's a response to the modern state. It's a response to the modern situation. If we recognize this, I think we can deal with it better than trying to look to the history to find solution. That's a bit of my, maybe you can say critique, maybe it's my own opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Very briefly, since there's a good exchange, the way they justify has clearly ideological roots that even I didn't have a chance to discuss today. How certain ideas from 11th century onwards by Mawardi Ghazali established the ideological basis. Therefore, we cannot simply reduce this issue as a modern colonial phenomenon, because ulama and the state, when they justify their alliances, they refer to Ibn Taymiyyah, they refer to Mawardi, Ahkam al-Sultaniya, they refer to Ghazali's Tahafut al-Falasafa, al-Iqtisad fil-I'tiqad. That's the ideational part. The institutional part is the madrasa system. And it wasn't British colonization that established madrasas. The madrasas started in the 11th century by Seljuk Nizamiye. Then all over the Ottoman Empire, the Sunni version, Safavi Empire, Shia version, even Mughals. In my book, I discuss the curriculum of the madrasa system in the Mughal, Safavi, and the Ottoman. And the way they treat philosophy as an excluded thing, and the natural sciences completely undermined, and very literal notion. And this educational system continued. So imagine yourself as a British colonizer coming to Malaysia or coming to French and Lebanon French colonizer in Lebanon, Syria you referred to. Yes, they were pragmatic. They say, oh, we can use this to perpetuate the rule. But it already was accepted by the people as a source of ideas. It already was institutionally very strong, from LSR to Turkey's Diyanet. There is a centuries-long institutional and ideological legacy. And in countries like Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, where there was no direct colonization, we see very strong ulama-state alliance which cannot be explained by colonial rule. That's why I end with Faruk's question. This has been taking so long, maybe overdue, and I hope this discussion will bring us to a better future. Thank you.
I've attended many of these. Can you continue after we finish?
In Malaysia, the British did come and establish these religious councils, which did give monopoly to the ulama, which didn't exist before. Yeah. So in a way, it undermined the independence of the ulama in Malaysia. So the colonialism did play a role, and wherever the ulama get power, they always want more power, everywhere.
Thank you very much. Ahmed, I think you broke the bank. Frankly speaking, I've never seen so many questions being asked, and there were no easy questions. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock at UIA, Kuliah of Economy, you can grill him again. Thank you all so very much. Please, just to add, please keep hope alive. We can, each individual can make a difference. Keep poking holes. Maybe you'll be able to make a change. It may be small, but if Prof. Faruk can be so versatile, and the rest of us can be even more active. Thank you very much. Let me call Dr. Ahmet to give tokens to the two discussions, and I get something too.
And you too.
Seriously, I've never seen so many questions. Please, Dr. Fadila.
Oops. Okay. Thank you very much.
Pictures.
Okay, never mind.
She bought a new dress for this, you know?
No, I didn't know.
Okay. Hey, you discuss it. Oh, please give this to Prof. Faruk. Yeah. Picture. I got one for the family, so it's enough. Okay. Are there coffee or something? Are there coffee or something? There is coffee outside, please.